And he's sitting in the back with his arms folded.
Yeah.
And he'd come late and he'd leave early. And then he disappeared for a little bit. And then one day he catches me after the service. And he says, "Can I talk to you?" I said, "Yeah, you can." He says, "Well, I can't call you the N-word," but he said the word.
Wow.
"I can't call you the N-word on account of what God done in my heart.
Mm.
And my granddaddy says y'all's like to be called colored. But I figured I'd ask you before I called you anything."
Mm.
And I said, "Well, that was a wise decision." Two other things.
Come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I said, "You can call me Pastor, or you can call me Leonce, or you can call me Pastor Lèonce." And he reached out his hand and he said, "Well, hell, Pastor, I'm on your team."
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Multi-Ethnic Gospel Approach podcast, where we cover all things multi-ethnic.
It's the MENGAPODCAST, the Mega Podcast. It's the MENGAPODCAST, Mega Podcast.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Multi-Ethnic Gospel Approach podcast, aka the Mega Podcast, where we cover all things multi-ethnic relating to ministry. Listen, we have another great guest with us today. He's incredible. When I first saw him and heard him, man, he was just very profound. And honestly, I don't know if you ever got this, but I feel like you reminded me of of Xerxes off of 300. When I first saw you, it was just his voice was so powerful. I was like, "Oh my God, he's here!" But y'all will get a chance to hear that in just a moment.
That's right.
But listen, I'm here with my main guy, Micah Gaston, my campus pastor. We've been doing some damage here in the Midtown area. When I say damage, I mean good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, be sure
We've been
to
doing some
clarify
very good stuff here in the Midtown area. And listen, I'm just glad to be here with you, man. And
Absolutely.
I'm gonna give it to you to introduce the man of the hour.
Absolutely.
And go from there, man.
Yeah, so we want to welcome Pastor Lèonce Crump, who's here with us today. So Pastor Lèonce has been there at Renovation Church in the Atlanta area and has been leading a multi-ethnic, multi-generational, church there in the Atlanta area, making a huge impact in the community, leading well, of course, leading through a Mosaics network. First time I ever heard you was at a Mosaics conference back in 2016. And so doing some really faithful ministry, really helping us unpack a good bit today. And what does it mean to really be present in your area, to really define, have a theology of presence and all that entails about really redeeming your city, redeeming your community. But I'd love for you, Pastor, just kind of weigh in. Tell us a little bit about your story, about Renovation Church, and just kind of about, what God's kind of doing there in the Atlanta area where you're at.
Yeah, thank you both for having me. When he introduced, that I sounded like Xerxes, it was very, very hard for me not to go, "I am kind."
Perfect. I bet you could do a killer James Earl Jones impression.
I do all right with James Earl Jones, but he's got a very distinct voice.
He does,
right?
But Bane is my favorite. But we'll save that.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
So yeah, I'm born and raised in Louisiana, and loved growing up there. Good food, good music. Of course, because it was the South and the Deep South at that, got introduced to the ill that is racism and prejudice and classism at a very early age. In fact, I'll never forget, I was a running back. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm much too big to be a running back now. But, when I first started, before I hit my spurt, I was a running back. And I broke for an 80-yard touchdown, and everybody standing up and cheering. And I'll never forget, one of the fathers of one of my teammates stands up and says, "That N-word runs like a horse." And that moment and several others profoundly impacted me. And so growing up, I began to become pretty hard-hearted and separatist. And there's a difference in pro-black and anti everything else, including anti-white. And I became very anti-white and very angry. And it would just so happen in the goodness of God that the young man that introduced me to the gospel was a young man named Judah Vidros, a young white kid who looked like a blonde-haired Tom Cruise, if you can imagine that. I mean, serious. The boy was killing the game in the youth group and scooping up all the honeys. But he was so righteous. He was turning them away left and right. He was just trying to be about God's business.
Wow.
And he's the one that ended up sharing the gospel with me and bringing me to youth group. I've got a long story about that we can cover another time. But we had a very much white men can't jump moment at the basketball court.
Wow.
And he was my Billy Hoyle. And the only way I could get him to leave was for me to agree to come to the youth group. Wow. And so I did. And the Lord radically changed my life that night. And I believe then he began to kind of, pull out those seeds of reactive prejudice and anger and hostility. From enduring so many years of racism. And so left Louisiana, went to wrestle and play football for the University of Oklahoma and started in vocational ministry there while I was still a student. As a matter of fact, one of the highlights from that time was meeting good gracious, I lost my train of thought. Football player, Reggie White.
Reggie, you played with the Packers, right?
Two very different people. Reggie White came down and encouraged me and another brother who some of y'all may know, Tommy Harris, played for Chicago Bears, multi-year Pro Bowler. We were teammates there, and he encouraged us to continue in the gospel and in that college ministry there. Left OU, tried to make the world team in wrestling, ended up having a brief NFL career. I knew all along that the Lord was calling me into vocational ministry, into pastoral ministry, and he always gets his person. And so he finally got me through a series of knee and shoulder injuries, were a wake-up call that perhaps I was out of position. And so I've submitted to that leading and began to pastor at a local church and coach near the University of Tennessee. That's where I met my wife. And then together, we moved to Atlanta with the hopes, with the dreams of starting what we called a transcultural, and still call a transcultural community here in the city. So that's kind of an abbreviated overview, and we can get into some of the details of how the Lord cultivated that vision in my heart, even there in Tennessee, where I was one of three people of color in a church of 1,700. And the only person of color in the ministry that I was leading, in the college ministry that I was leading. And we saw the Lord do so much incredible reconciliation work. And if we have time, I'll get to some of those stories. But that's how we ended up here in Atlanta. And God has just been so gracious to us over this last decade and some change.
That's cool, man.
Awesome.
Well, hey, I just want to take a moment real quick for those of you who are watching on our YouTube channel. Make sure you take a moment, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you can get all the updates and be tethered to all that we do. And also, you can go ahead and look in the description. And there's a link there so you can follow us on all of our platforms if you just want to catch all the audio. And so at this time, man, I know we got some questions lined up for the Leonce Crump. And so I'm gonna go ahead and give it back over to Micah real quick. We're gonna kick it off and we're gonna get started, man. Let him share his heart and some of this other great information that he has and all of that man he is. He's a very large individual, y'all.
That's right.
He's a large individual. He's not small.
That's right.
He's not small.
You really can get a sense of that he played in the NFL till like you see one of us stand next to him and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I got it.
Yeah, you're gonna look at us like we real normal.
you see him sitting down now, but if he was standing up, you'd be looking up at him.
Right.
So,
oh man,
yeah, man, absolutely. Well, Pastor, thank you for sharing a little bit of your story and your heart, man.
Yeah.
So I know you've written a book where you unpack this to a much more deeper level. But can you unpack for us a little bit to talking to church planners, church leaders, who are in an urban context, and people kind of thinking through what does that look like, particularly those you're empowering. What does it mean when you talk about to have a ministry of presence? When you describe that for people and what that means as far as their thinking about how they approach the community.
Absolutely. Not to get too granular or too intellectual. and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just don't want it to not be palatable.
Sure.
But we are living in the most transitory and transient and mobile era probably in human history. In fact, Richard Florida writes a great book about that. And it's impacted every sector and every corner of society, including ministry and how church is done and how people function and even what their expectations are for a church. And so, and I'm not totally negative on this. I'm a parachute planter myself. I do not recommend it for anybody for any reason. But along those same lines, church planting has kind of become this machine where it's like, pick the right guy or the right girl with the right team in the right place with the right building. And if you build it, they will come. And it can be effective, but the data tells us that it's really not. It's not producing the results that we want to see. And so when we moved to Atlanta, we tried that. In fact, a lot of people talk about the success of Renovation Church, but many people don't know about the failures that led up to us even getting out of the ground. We had 3 failed attempts before we ever had anything resembling a worship service.
Oh, wow.
And I believe in those failed attempts, we learned what it meant to have a ministry of presence and a theology of place. And I would separate those two things and say that a theology of place is an understanding that God's redemptive work goes as far as the curse is found. In fact, there's a great book about that and a great Christmas song about that. And so our work in ministry and leading and shepherding and in the apostolic work of planting churches, the evangelistic work of proclaiming the gospel, the teaching work of building up the faith of the people, the prophetic work of calling people to fidelity, the missional work of seeing disciples multiply. All of that work is not just about the individual people that you're reaching, but it is actually about seeing the transformation of the place that they inhabit, of the place that they occupy. And one of the great scripture verses that I turn to often is Jeremiah 29. And in there, you see 3 generations of people and work that will take place, plant gardens, build houses, marry and be married, give your children in marriage and their children in marriage. And so now you see 3 generations where God has said, if you will hunker down here with a long view and for the good, not just of yourselves or for just the people, but even the environment you inhabit, and you will be a blessing to this place and you'll seek the welfare of this place, then your welfare will be tied up in it as well. So that's a theology of place. And coupled with that, the idea of a ministry of presence sounds exactly like the words. It is a ministry of being fully present in a place, fully present to God, fully present to self, fully present to others, so that the place that you are called to tells you how it will be reached. Versus you coming in with a plan for people that you've never met. And our failures were because we had all the Lifeway books and the Tim Keller Church Planning Manual and a big dynamic leader who's an ex-football player and a beautiful wife who's godly and quiet but can also lead worship. And it's like, why won't this work? This is the Big Bang Theory, baby. Clap it together and watch this thing spring up out of the ground. And it was wall after wall after wall, failure after failure, until we became present and we took a long view and we said, okay, Atlanta's going to show us how to reach Atlanta the way that we are meant to reach Atlanta. And we won't make another move until it does. And that was when things really started to come together.
Man, wow. That's so key, because even just the aspect of, when you think of a relationship, like, you don't love people the way you want to love people, but you love people the way that they need to be loved based on their love language. Right. And so I just think that mentality toward ministry is so effective. And it's just great that you figured it out, man, and that you're here to share that with us today.
we'll call it a Holy Ghost download. I don't know that I figured it out so much as I had failed so many times that I was forced into a posture of humility and desperation and said, okay, Lord, this is the last swing. Either we're about to move back in with my parents while I finish this MBA, and move on to business, which is another passion of mine, or this thing got to work. So you got to show me something. Yeah. And that's where that was birthed from.
Very real place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you could you, I guess, give us a handful of ways that we can begin to live out the theology of place? Like, what are maybe just a couple things that you would give to us or some church planners who are listening to where they can live that out?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it starts with a history lesson. Most people have no idea how the place they occupy came to be, how it has taken shape. And those things matter. When we were still in Grant Park and living in Grant Park, one of the first questions I had, just out of curiosity, is you have I-20 running through the middle of this neighborhood. And actually not even the middle. I would say, it cuts it off at 1/4 and 3/4, north and south. Everything north was experiencing this boon of development and industry and restaurants and all of, and everything south of that has been very slow to catch up now, because gentrification is a hungry animal that will eventually consume everything in its path. Until the process starts over again, it's finally started to touch those areas as well. But when we first moved there, that was one of my first questions, is why is there an interstate running right through the middle of a neighborhood? Well, it's because it used to be historically African-American neighborhood. And there's so many variables here, right? So sure. McDonald's, for instance, if you watch the movie The Founder, you find that there were a number of key ingredients that actually made McDonald's successful, including desegregation. Because when desegregation happened, white flight followed. And now dad's working in the city, mom's at home with the kids are at school somewhere else. Life has become more busy. Dad's not going to be home for dinner at 5. We've got to figure out what to do. Well, dad's going to pick up McDonald's on the way home. Right. And that's why McDonald's took off the way it did in the era that it did. And so you lay that same framework over just a city like Atlanta, and you realize, well, desegregation happened. And so white families primarily moved out, but they were still working in the city because the industry was still in the city. And they needed a more expedient way to get to and from whatever part of the city they were living in. And it didn't matter to throw a highway in the middle of this neighborhood where these poor Black folks live. And so you find in Atlanta that the economic growth and the wealth of the city grows up toward the northeast. Now, that's not to say it's not anywhere else, but the concentration is north and east. The concentration of poverty is south and west. And the highway systems in this city accommodate those pathways. So in order to effectively minister to an environment like that, you've got to know how it got there. Yeah. You've got to know why that grandma's grass is overgrown and her windows are, blown out. And why there are developers offering her 4 times what her house is worth in order to purchase it. Well, because they know she can't afford her property taxes, as property taxes continue to go up as the city changes. And they'll buy the house for $80,000 or $100,000, but they know they'll sell it to a millennial or a zennial or a young Gen Xer wanting to experience urban living for $500,000. And they'll make their money back in spades. And so understanding all of those dynamics and effectively architecting a ministry around it starts with knowing the history of the place that you are a part of. So that's just that. I would say that is the major banner. And then everything else kind of falls underneath that. How does the school system work? Have you connected with the principals? Who are the local business owners? Are there local business owners? One of the things I discovered is that there were many things owned in Atlanta by people who don't even live here. So they don't have a concern for how the city takes shape. Yeah. They're primarily there for their bottom line. right? And whatever industry goes up around whatever property they own, well, it doesn't matter if it benefits the people that are there. It only matters that it produces the ends that they want to see.
Yeah.
All of those things begin to inform how you do ministry and with whom you do ministry. And if I'm talking too much, forgive me.
No,
please.
man, you're good. Please, we asked you on to talk, man.
Right.
So you're good, man. We love for you to unpack this for us. So yeah.
I mean, we ain't gonna fight you.
I wondered which would break first.
So good. So good. I just run.
That right?
I just run.
That's
I know run kind of good.
That's right. So yeah, I mean, you can throw insults or get it started, but I just got to outrun you. You know,
Right.
if he catches you, I'm fine.
You know, these are facts. I'm gonna just start rolling. Oh man, cool. This has been real good so far, man.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
He's the man.
So much, Rich, like you said, those Holy Spirit downloads, those things that God has taught you there that you can only learn in the context. Sometimes, through the painful process of failing, failing forward, hopefully, but failing, and I know, some of those things are dynamics, we're trying to figure out here in our context in Midtown. And, some of those stories about how our neighborhood became what it is have been so significant for us to define what does it mean to really effectively reach our community, to not, to not simply start a ministry because it's a thing to do, but to make sure it's what we're called to do, that is going to not be replicating something somewhere else, what God's called us to do, and do it here based upon our mission and gifting and team members and the needs of the community, being so central to kind of
and assets in the community. And let me,
For sure.
sorry for cutting you off, Micah.
No, you're good. Please.
But that's important too.
Yeah.
It's not just what the community needs, it's what the community has. There are assets there.
Yeah.
And thinking through an asset lens will also help to curb paternalism.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
good. It's brilliant.
Yeah, for sure. And that's been a huge, for us, to share a little bit of our story, it's, we've done this thing called Ransom Cafe now for, we just hit our 3-year mark. And, it's something that has the idea of, it's not simply, a hand out, but a hand up is the terminology we use in our teams, of trying to meet people where they are. So it's serving people a meal in the context of their dignity. And so they don't just show up and receive something. They show up and they have the ability to give something. So it means they can give a small donation. It could be a penny or an act of kindness in exchange for their meal. And so that was something that started with just having a presence. They come, people eat. We get a sense of who's in the community, what are their needs, and be able to have conversations about who's here. And it really being kind of a community approach to it. But yet, when COVID started, that's something we went from a 1-day a meal, 2-hour service on Wednesdays to a 3-day to-go program. With now I think we've crossed the $25,000 or 25,000 meal mark. But it's been it has been something that's really redefined who we are in the community, and how people think about how we serve the community. And it's been life-giving for us, and I think is something that would be different than if we just handed out something. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That we didn't say, what's the asset you have to give? That's something you can contribute, that you bring to the table, that you already have. And so it's not enhancing that mindset of generational poverty of you have nothing to bring. You have no assets to lay down as you receive something. It's been very life-giving for us. And so I can definitely see that. That's a great point of being able to free people to see what did they bring, what they bring to the table. So free, for sure.
Good. So I got another question for you. What does it mean to live as a sent church? As a sent church, what does that mean?
Yeah, if I could sum it up this way, God has a mission, so he made a church.
Mm-hmm.
We actually don't have a mission. Now, that's my opinion. Others may disagree. And Renovation has a mission statement because that is that is how we function in Western society. But I am a firm believer, and I can prove it to you biblically, that God has a mission to accomplish, which is reconciling as many people to himself as will receive the good news and restoring the world. And so in order to accomplish that, he formed a church. And when you have that framework, you realize that your church cannot exist for itself. And that's what it means to be a sent church. It is, we don't exist for ourselves. And this is a lesson I've had to relearn over and over and over and over again. In 17 years of vocational ministry and in 10 years leading Renovation Church, it's very easy. And it sometimes looks spiritual to exist for yourself.
Wow.
But as a sent entity, yes, we want to take care of our members. Yes, we want to make sure the body is built up. Yes, we want to make sure that people are encouraged and counseled and nourished. But to what end?
Man.
Well, so that they'll be multiplied and mobilized to see it happen again and again and again and again and again. And that's a different mentality. History has proven anybody can fill a room or a stadium. Anybody can. Right time, right moment, right message. Hitler filled the stadium. Right?
Tough.
But was his work transformative? No, it was destructive. And so, and these are lessons learned hard, brothers. I got seduced by the addition for a little bit. And it's seductive. You go from a core group of 3 to 35 to 150 to 350 to 700. Pretty soon you got 1,200 people showing up. And it becomes about maintaining those people and what they need so easily. And you forget, no, we're not here to build Renovation Church. We're here to see the kingdom of God break in more fully through the building up of the people of Renovation Church. And it's very subtle, but it makes a massive difference in how you approach everything.
Absolutely.
Crazy. I mean, even just thinking about what you said as far as us not having a mission, because, the Bible says, not my will, but yours be done. And it's like, we're always submitting ourselves to the will of God. And so our will should be his will. And so really we have, when you think about it, like our mission is his. Like we're out to please his mission, and to fulfill his mission. Just as Jesus did, he came and fulfilled, the law. He didn't create one. He didn't, you know what I'm saying? So it's just all that kind of just registers with me. So yeah, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
Listen, when you turn to that book, everything becomes clear.
That's right.
Now I've got a whole shelf of leadership books over here, and we're in my home study right now. I've got a whole shelf of leadership books over here, and I don't despise one of them.
Sure.
Yeah.
But when you turn to that book,
That's right,
sir.
Everything becomes clear.
Yeah.
From Genesis 1:26 and 27, be fruitful and multiply. That was their vocation right there. The vocation was given again to Noah, given again to Abram, given again to Moses, given again. They just kept coming back with the same vocation.
Yeah.
Reflect my glory and invite other people to do the same and watch me transform this thing.
Yeah.
And we just, we get off on all kind of nonsense.
That's tough. So for the listener, Pastor Lèonce Crump just stated that you don't have a mission, you have instructions, ma'am and sir. You have instructions.
That's what I said.
That's right. That's right.
Oh man, so good.
So good, man. So Pastor Lèonce, I'd love for you to tell a little bit of just, so let's say that you were sitting down with a church planner, and they're going to plant in an urban context. And I know, number one, like you explained to us a while ago, you need to learn the history, you need to learn your community, and maybe it's not even like you said, maybe they're not parachuting into a new place. Maybe God's just called them to plant a church in the city they grew up in. But they don't know that specific block or that specific context. What would you say to them, other than learning the history, is going to be some of those major things that are going to help them just really, to reach that area effectively? In the sense that, like you talked about your reconciliation work, that it's gonna they're in a diverse place where it's probably going to be layers there of ethnicity, of economy, of different approaches to life. What would you say to a planner stepping into that context, or maybe somebody revitalizing a church in a context like that?
Yeah, and let me say, I don't think this just applies to an urban context.
Sure.
In fact, and because I don't know who all's listening.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know that in the past, myself, Dr. Keller, even parts of Acts 29, we began to so focus on cities that our folk out in the burbs, out in the country, in the exurbs, in the between urbs, in a place like Atlanta, and we can get into this if we have time, but Atlanta's not a real city. It's a sprawl. It's a collection of neighborhoods. And they just put a ring around it and said, that's the city and that's not the city. Well, I can give you demography and psychography and economic data that shows that there are suburbs in Atlanta that match the exact profile of the urban core. So what do you call that area? Right.
Yeah.
So
wow.
I'm just saying all that to say that this has widespread application. Absolutely. And many of the lessons that God taught me, I learned in Sevierville, Tennessee, and began to reapply them at the heart of Atlanta. And so what I would say is the first thing you need to do after the history and the learning is find your person of peace, because they are going to be a part of unlocking that area and unlocking the hearts of the people and getting you access to things. In every place I found myself, I can look back now and say, oh, that was my person of peace. In Sevierville, and I didn't even know we'd get here, but we got here. In Sevierville, it was a young man named Stephen. And in this crazy world that we live in, he would show up to our college ministry in a jacked up truck, listening to T-Pain with 2 Confederate flags flying from the side of the truck.
Wow.
Carhartt overalls, no shirt, just and work boots on. Double gun rack in the back, not a single, but a double.
Wow.
I mean, you talking about a real legit Appalachian country boy.
That was so good.
And he's sitting in the back with his arms folded.
Yeah.
And he'd come late and he'd leave early. And then he disappeared for a little bit. And then one day he catches me after the service. And he says, can I talk to you? I said, yeah, you can. He says, well, I can't call you the N-word, but he said the word.
Wow.
I can't call you the N-word on account of what God done in my heart. And my granddaddy says y'all's like to be called colored. But I figured I'd ask you before I called you anything. And I said, well, that was a wise decision. Two other things.
Come on.
Yeah, absolutely.
I said, you can call me Pastor, or you can call me Leonce, or you can call me Pastor Lèonce. And he reached out his hand and he said, well, hell, Pastor, I'm on your team. And I'm not kidding you. From that day forward, we saw the multiplicative ability of our ministry take off like it had not in the previous 4 or 5 months.
Wow.
Because he knew things I didn't know. He saw things I couldn't see. He connected me to people who otherwise would not have connected with me. And we just saw it do this. Here in Atlanta, I ended up meeting the principal of Dr. Martin Luther King Middle School. And I just began to ask her, how can we serve you? Well, who is we? I said, well, I'm trying to start a church. And we just want to be a blessing to the neighborhood. You just want to meet in my school. Said it just like that.
Wow.
I said, well, ma'am, that would be nice. But even if you say no to that, I still want to be a blessing to you and to your teachers and to your students.
Mm.
And she leaned back and she said, we'll see. We'll see. It's only a sister in Atlanta can. We'll see. So we began to feed and clothe and bought a washer and dryer for the school, just anything that we could do to seek their welfare. And she became our person of peace. And as long as she was the principal of that school, I don't think we paid more than just the cleaning fee to be there.
Wow.
I had buddies paying, $8,000 a month to be in elementary schools.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we've got a 400-seat amphitheater. I can send y'all a picture if you want to post it up on the web some other time. But we've got a 400-seat amphitheater. I think we're paying $500 a month for it. And storage. I mean, we had the run of the school.
Wow.
And that accelerated our ministry. And so I would say to any young planter or planter team or planter couple, who is your person of peace? Even if you grew up there, it may not be your block. Even if it's your block, it may have changed dramatically since the last time you were there.
Yeah. Wow.
Who's your person of peace? Who knows the city better than you probably ever could? That's the relationship you want to broker out of the gate. And I've had 4 or 5 here in our tenure, and every single time, whatever God is doing in and through us, they accelerate it.
Wow. Yeah, that's good, man. Rich.
So how do you continually just appeal to the hearts of your people? Because obviously you have a big heart to meet needs that are there and to minister to people. But how do you continue to reach people, especially in a multi-ethnic context with all the social issues that are going on? Because I'm pretty sure you got a bunch of white people in your church and black people in your church and people from all over the world. How do you appeal to their hearts, in times like these that we're facing, where you have people of color dying, and then you have people of our Appalachian brothers and sisters, as you described them, who are on the opposite end of the spectrum, saying, there's no way that racism could ever exist, or, how do you appeal to people's hearts who may find themselves in the same church but on different ends of the political, social, and biblical spectrum? How do you appeal to them?
Yeah, the primary way is removing the biblical. There's no biblical spectrum. It's just the Bible, and the Bible's clear.
Yeah.
From Genesis to Revelation, the Bible is clear about God's intentions for humanity and for the world. This has not been easy. We in 2014. That's how you know you've been doing this too long. When you're like, wait, what year was it? 2014, when Michael Brown was killed. I stood up in front of our congregation, and I very gingerly said, I'm not saying who was wrong. I'm not saying who was right. What I'm asking you right now, particularly if you are not an African American, Black, or person of color, I'm asking you to weep with those who weep and mourn with those who mourn. That is all that I said. Over the next several months, we had about 100 to 130, 40 people transition out of our church because I had become political in their estimation. And so I don't want to paint rose-colored glasses here for you guys. Being faithful to a multi-ethnic understanding of the gospel, which is the only understanding of the gospel, is costly. And you're going to lose good people who are so absorbed in their confusion, their pain, or their selfishness in every direction. And so you have to, I've said this to so many brothers and sisters. If multi-ethnic is a fad for you, if it's a good idea, if it's because you think that's where the next wave of the church is going,
come on, sir.
Stop now. Because the cost is more than you can bear. If you don't have a biblical vision that the start and the ends of redemption is a reconciled community from every tribe, nation, tongue, ethnos, economic standing, educational background, and upbringing, reconciled to God and each other, if that is not your understanding of the start and the ends of redemption, stop now. Because your vision and your conviction won't be firm enough to absorb the reverberations of political regime changes, mass and non-mass shootings, police killings and police killers. It won't be enough. It won't be enough. Philosophy and best practice don't hold a multi-ethnic church together. A thoroughly rooted, grounded, transcultural or multi-ethnic, whichever word you want to use, understanding of the gospel and all of its ends, that is what holds it together. Because it's going to be tested at every point and in every part. I haven't been black enough, I've been too black. I haven't been political enough, I've been too political.
Yeah.
My South Asians and my East Asians are like, all y'all talk about is race. We here too. It is just, I got Latino folks, they just want to blend in. I got other Latino folks, they are zealots, and you start talking about justice, and now it's like, okay, but you can't speak against abortion. You speak against the death penalty, and it's now okay, but you're not faithful to conservatism because, just because you spoke against abortion, this is my right. You say something about gun. I mean, listen.
Yeah.
If it's a fad, if it's a function of some ministry season, then it's already doomed to fail. But if it's rooted and grounded in the gospel and the good news and that book, and understanding that redemption starts and ends with reconciled peoples to a reconciled God, then we got a shot. We got a shot.
Man. Well, guys, it has been incredible thus far with Pastor Lèonce Crump, a.k.a. Xerxes, a.k.a. Bain, a.k.a. the Reverend Dr. Earl James Jr. III. It's been a great time here, man. We've got a wealth of knowledge, and I just want to encourage you again as you're watching. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, as well as follow us on all of our platforms to catch our podcast and share it with your friends. There are other people in the gospel who are planting churches or who are trying to figure out what this looks like for their context, and all of these resources that we're putting out is there for you and for them. So we just ask that you share the love, and share this wealth, because this is wealth in its finest form. Just understanding how to build God's kingdom effectively and what God intended for us. So, yeah, I'm gonna throw it to my man Micah, and let him close us out. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
All right,
Sounds
cool.
good. Thank you. So Pastor Lèonce, we just want to thank you, man, for just your investment today and taking time out of your schedule there in ATL, man, just to share with us just your heart for the mission of God, and the church being effective in reaching all of its community and really carrying out, like you told us today, the mission of God, and not just a fad, not just some ideas, but really carrying out the mission of God for all of God's people faithfully, man. It's been really good and rich. We appreciate your time.
Thank you all for having me and allowing me to pontificate a little bit on some things that are close to my heart.
Pontificate.
I hope they were helpful.
Yeah, man. Very, very good stuff, man. I'm sure it'll be helpful to us and also anybody that listens later. So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you, brother.
Amen.